Good morning, everyone, and welcome to a new seminar of the EBD Seminar series, organized by me, María José Ruiz, Irene Mendoza, and Agustín Camacho. Today, we are really happy to welcome our colleague Agustín Camacho to give a seminar. He is a Marie Curie Fellow at the EBD and works with Miguel Tejedo. And he is a ecophysiologist, and he has been working in Brazil, Australia, and United States for a long time. And his research seeks to understand how the environment interacts with evolving phenotypes to determine where a species can live and the consequences of such interactions. Agustín, when you are ready, you can start. Thank you very much.
Hello, everybody. I am very thankful to María José and Irene for allowing me to co-organize this seminar series with them. I hope that you are all enjoying the talk as I am. And today, I'd like to share with you my previous experiences with some of my favorite research topics, which are snake-like lizards, thermal biology, and biogeography. I think that at least some of you know what is this. This extremely rare bicephalous mutant belongs to a group of animals sometimes called blind snakes or worm lizards. These animals have fascinated me since I was a kid, when I will find them when flipping rocks or when digging in the backyard. And this specifically was found in my native city of Córdoba and brought to my attention by Rocío Muñoz and Diego Peinazo from the Society of Natural History of Córdoba. Despite its aspect, this is not a snake. It is actually more related to the Lacertidae family of lizards, which comprises the common species, most of the common species that we find around here in Spain. It is neither blind. They can actually see, although their skin covers their eyes, and you can see their eyes through their skin. This skin helps them to bury beneath the ground by protecting their sensitive eyes. So, as you might already know, the fascination for snakes might even be older than us as a species. Like even for laboratory-reared rhesus monkeys, they also, these monkeys, when reared in the laboratory, they still show some sort of instinctive fear to them. But for us in humans, representations and explanation of the origin of snakes, they might date back over 2,000 years. For example, according to the Varaha Purana, one of the main texts of the Hindu philosophy, all snakes come from the third wife of Brahma's son. Her name was Kadru, which is the root for the word Kadruja, which means cobra in Hindu. It's no wonder that they praise him so much, right? You have seen all of these representations of cobras in the Hindu, related to Hindu culture, right? And in the Catholic portraits, though, when they try to show the original sin, it is common to depict this diabolic snake as limbless, right? As a common snake. However, the Old Testament tells us that the snake was originally limbed, and it lost its legs as a condemnation for leading Eve to commit the original sin. So maybe somebody in the Old Testament actually was thinking that there were some lizards or some limbed reptiles that were looking a little bit like snakes, and that might have to do with their origin. In fact, the origin and evolution of snakes has long been, and remains to be in some aspects, a mysterious gap in the evolution of vertebrates. Among the first scientists bringing up this mystery was the Baron Franz Nopcsa, who discovered the fossil of a gigantic snake, Pachyophis woodwardi. You can see here in this stamp. And Franz Nopcsa found this gigantic snake in marine sediments. And these remains, these fossils, open the possibility that the first snakes could be marine, which is a topic for still current debate. So after that, they have been thought to be related to the mosasaurs, which is another type of elongated marine reptile, as you can see right here, and that at some point ruled many of the seas of the world. The Professor John Viens and several collaborators have advanced muchly the understanding of the origin of snakes. This phylogenetic tree of squamates although not the newest nor the most complete, shows enough of the current consensus on the origin of snakes. It combines morphological and genetic data from many extant species of squamates, and also fossils like the mosasaurs here. Snakes, according to this phylogeny or this phylogenetic arrangement, snakes would be but one of several snake-like groups that have evolved among lizards. For example, like the worm lizards that we just saw, often called amphisbaenians, and the mosasaurs. So as you can see, worm lizards, snakes, and mosasaurs are different independent lineages that have evolved with elongated morphologies with short and or non-existent limbs. We call this process evolutionary convergence. Lizards, they just do this all the time. Along their more than 100, actually around 180 years of known history, they have evolved many times, over 25 independent times, the snake-like morphology. You can see that they have evolved in different families that are distributed almost all across the world, excepting to the exception of the Antarctica. We have several different families like Anguidae, Syncytidae, Dipamidae, Amphisbaenidae, Cordyllidae, Pyrgopodidae, and Gymnophthalmidae. The different snake-like morphs, they can be separated into two types that are here represented by the Australian family Pygopodidae, which are, interestingly, much related, especially related to the geckos, to the wall geckos that we see in our houses many times. Here we can see that Lialis and Delma, they are two genera that represent the grass swimmer snake-like morphotype. So these morphotypes, they are characterized by having extremely long tails that help them to move across the grass. Here in the right, you can see my picture holding one of these morphs. This is not a pygopodid, this is a cordylid, and it has one of the longest, possibly the longest tail with respect to the body size for a lizard in the world. This is a Camesaura enea, and what you can see here, my finger is pointing towards its cloaca, and all this is the tail, while only just this is the little body. It's amazing, right? So apart from that, these lizards, these grass swimmers, sometimes have elongated mouth, elongated crania that have some sort of kinesis. And that helps them to have some flexibility and hold some big prey, some larger prey, a little bit larger prey. In contrast, the fossorial lizards, fossorial snake-like lizards, they often have shovel-like heads, and their tails, they're often very short, very tiny and pointy. That helps them to reduce the drag while they are boring beneath the sand. Well, one of my first encounters with these snake-like lizards, and other than amphisbaenians that I saw when I was a kid, was during an expedition to the savannas of Brazil, sometimes called the Cerrado. The very first day that we arrived to this place in Tocantins, to the Serra Geral de Tocantins, I found one of these little tracks in the sand, these undulated and fascinating tracks. My advisor then, Miguel Rodriguez Trefó, who had described an entire fauna of fossorial reptiles in Brazil, in a region that was not so far away from this one. He immediately recognized these tracks, and he told me that this could be either a Bacchia, a lizard from the genus Bacchia, or the genus Calyptomatus, he said. And he was pretty right. The tracks turned out to be the Bacchia oxyrhina, a new species of this genus for the savannas of Brazil. These lizards, they fascinated me because they seem to be very fragile against high temperatures and were pretty rare during our trip. Since my master project, I was interested. I did this master project in community structure, in community ecology, in which I found several patterns in microhabitat use of several lizards of Brazil. So since then, I was interested in understanding the evolutionary processes that will lead to microhabitat selection, to the patterns in microhabitat selection that I found. Now I got enticed by this study system because they seemed to be very fragile animals living in such a torrid and harsh environment. So I wanted to try and study these snake-like lizards. At the time, well, here you can see some pictures of the little limbs that it has. They are very pretty when you have them in your hands. It's really fascinating how they move these little limbs. So at the time, it was very unclear on how to study the thermal environment to identify thermal restrictions for these fossorial reptiles. So that got me several interesting discussions with my supervisor about what would be the best way to do it. And at some point, we were able to publish an article showing how extreme temperatures can actually help you identify thermal restrictions to microhabitat use. Another problem that we had is that the traditional way of collecting these lizards was using large pitfall traps like the one that you can see in the image. However, this system was only giving a handful of specimens per expedition. Thus, these species were considered very rare and difficult to work with. Then I tried I organized a pilot project for my PhD, and I tried to hunt them in a different approach, and so try to get more, to get more specimens and get more information from them than just collecting them from the bucket. What I did try to do was to rake it all, basically, go to a region where there will be expectations of finding this species, and raking it all. So I raked different microhabitats, including sand, grasses, leaf litter, under and outside the vegetation or at exposed soil. And I also deposited several temperature data loggers at these different microhabitats. In that way, I will have information on how many were they, which of these microhabitats would they be using, and also what were the temperatures that were happening at these places. This time was very, you can imagine, this was absolutely fantastic. After spotting one lizard by rake, after spending a lot of time raking, you will see the lizards just sneaking beneath the ground, and you will have to jump over them, and then sometimes you will just get a very large centipede, or sometimes you will just rake out a large coral snake or a rattlesnake. So these were times of very funny and naive discovery, and I was for a long time accompanied by my friend and taxonomist Marco Sena. I cannot thank him enough for his absolutely uninterested help with this. It turned out that all this game allowed us to get a lot of specimens. We got over 20 something specimens from a relatively wide region, and that helped me to devise a system to measure their preferred temperatures that they would record in a small thermal gradient that I will show later, and to compare these preferred temperatures that are here represented by this frequency distribution of body temperatures with the temperatures found in the different microhabitats. In fact, the microhabitats used specifically by these lizards were the ones in which, as expected, the environmental temperatures would not often overcome the preferred temperatures of the lizards. That is absolutely expected, right? Like in places where temperatures go every day over the maximum preferred temperatures that might even kill them, these places will not be occupied by the lizards, and what will be occupied will be these microhabitats that were giving them some sort of thermal refuge. The big number of animals that we found also helped Renato Recoder and Mauro Teixeira and two other colleagues of the laboratory to identify these individuals as a new species, as yet another new species. So we published it all with the discovery of these species. We also discovered that the small hatchlings will tend to be all together, and also they will try to find the most humid place while in their terraria. So it also suggested that these animals were pretty challenged by the harsh environment, by the high temperatures and the low humidity that occurred there for a long part of the year, and that they solved that by using only a small portion of the full area of the park where we studied. This means that they traded. They were able to withstand the high temperatures, the high environmental temperatures, by remaining in very specific microhabitats only. That's probably why they were so rare to find, and why they will be able to resist in these habitats despite of their relatively low thermal tolerance. So with this in mind, I prepared a PhD project in which I wanted to examine several hypotheses to explain the origin of snake-like lizards and their microhabitat use. There were several scientific giants that studied snake-like lizards before. So I prepared the hypothesis according to what they had proposed before. So for example, we had Rodriguez, my supervisor at the time, proposed that avoiding thermal extremes at the soil surfaces will have promoted the evolution of these morphotypes. Gans and Carl Gans in the 75, he proposed that it would happen, the evolution of these morphs will be favored by an improvement of the locomotion in sandy soils, or to be able to pass through cracks within the soil. Richard Shine and Eric Pianka and Laurie Witt would propose that the snake-like lizards, the origin of the snake-like lizards, will be related to improvements in the ability of feeding underground. So I examine all these hypotheses, but today I'm going to talk to you only about the thermal biology one, and leave the other one for another story. So, okay, so my general question here was whether the acquisition of snake-like lizards, the acquisition of a snake-like morphology, will favor behavioral thermoregulation and avoidance of thermal risk in lizards. Beforehand, it's important to know a little bit about behavioral thermoregulation. In its simplest form, behavioral thermoregulation is the maintenance of body temperatures within a range that you can see here that optimizes the performance of physiological functions. This can be perfectly visualized in this compilation done by Raymond Hewitt. Here, the distribution of body temperatures, the distribution of body temperatures maintained by the desert iguana helps to optimize the performance of all these functions. You can have endurance, burst speed, which is the sprint speed, digestive efficiency, hearing efficiency, etc., etc. So if the body temperature of a lizard or other animal raises over the preferred range of temperatures, it might reach what we call the critical thermal maximum here. This temperature causes an immediate paralysis and death, and it can cause death in a matter of minutes. So it's something that the lizards need to avoid. Okay. In addition, another study on another species of North American lizards, concretely Cheloporus occidentalis, the researchers, Sinervo and collaborators, will find that the longer the time that animals could spend within their preferred temperatures, the more mass-specific growth rate they will have. This will mean that the longer they could spend daily within their preferred temperatures, the more mass they could gain. This means that they will have mass available to create fetus, to reproduce. So apart from avoiding death, keeping your body temperatures within your preferred temperatures helps you to increase the mass and the energy available for reproduction faster. Also, during the time, there was a compilation about several different species, a compilation on the thermophysiology of several different species of lizards from different ecologies, and they found that burrowing lizards in general will have low preferred temperatures and very low critical thermal maximum. So all this was giving me the ideas to test the following predictions, which were: first, burrowing deeper underground will increase the number of daily hours with access to preferred temperatures, okay? And second, that a snake-like morphology would help to reach places where maximum temperatures would not exceed the individual's critical thermal maximum, okay? So by acquiring a body form of a snake-like, lizard will be able to burrow better, increasing the daily time within the preferred temperatures, and also being more able to avoid temperatures that will be dangerous for them. In this case, I wanted to study the Gymnophthalmini lizards, which is a small tribe of a monophyletic group of lizards from the Gymnophthalmidae family. And this group has one common ancestor called this tribe, they have one common ancestor, and in the most basal position of the clade, it has Psilophthalmus pyeminosus, or later known as Psilops pyeminosus, and Microrephoros maximiliani, which are lizard species typical from highlands from the central Brazil, or from northeastern Brazil more specifically. Then we have two derived clades, in which one is composed by lacertoid lizards and the other is composed by snake-like lizards with very little limbs. These ones mostly occupy lower regions, but sometimes they can also happen in highlands too. The caatinga, which is the habitat these animals inhabit, means planta branca in native Tupi Guarani language, and it refers to the view of this habitat when all these shrubs have lost their leaves. In this particular region of the Caatinga, it is possible to find the whitest wind-blown sands. This sand comes from the erosion of sandstone at the Espinhaço system that is crossing north to south a big tract of central Brazil. In some areas of this sand form enormous dunes dating from the Quaternary period, as you can see in the image. And this group is distributed all across that. It is interesting to notice that the lacertoid morphotype for this group, you can see that the lacertoid morphotype is widely distributed across South America. You can see it represented by the purple areas. Okay. In turn, the snake-like morphotype only happens across these small regions of northeastern Brazil, here in red. So I distributed my 4 sampling areas across lowlands and highlands that had different subsets of species of both types. These species live together symptotically, and what I mean is that they live under the very same bushes and palms. I designed a small battery of measurements to apply in each of these sites. For example, I wanted a vertical profile of soil temperatures at different microhabitats. And for that, I left the data loggers at 4 different depths and 2 different microhabitat types, open sand and under vegetation. So during these trips, I was always accompanied by a colleague, and I collected up to 15 lizards per species and took them to Sao Paulo. There, I measured their preferred temperatures in these little thermal gradients where they will have a lot of different temperatures available, and they will be attached to a little wire called thermocouple that measures their body temperatures. To allow for them to dig, I had to use little plastic beads that would help for the thermocouple not to fall while I was measuring these thermal preferences. Apart from the preferred temperatures, I also measure their critical thermal maximum, which involves heating the animals in a controlled water bath within a can, and being very, very careful to avoid them to die. You want to find the temperature that paralyzes them, but not to kill them. So this is a more dangerous and has to be a very, very well controlled experiment. Finally, I needed to know how deep will they reach in the sand in response to a heating. So I did this experimental heating and observed them using X-ray imaging, thanks to Ana Carol Pinto Fonseca from the veterinary faculty of the University of Sao Paulo. Basically, what I will do is to put the lizards within this sandy these recipients filled with sand, and they will naturally burrow a little bit to avoid me, to try and protect from me. So when they will do that, I will take an image, and then I will hit them. And after I will reach around 44, 45 centigrade degrees, which was around the mean city max for this species, I will take yet another picture to identify which was the depth that they will have reached. So with these experiments, I could measure which would be their ability, or some sort of their average capacity to go underground in response to a situation of a hot sand, of a very hot sand. So these were the results of my measurements of the environmental temperatures. In the left, you can see the average of the maximum temperatures recorded across the four sampling sites. You can see that in the surface, temperatures reach very, very, very high values that cannot be paralleled by the critical thermal maximum of the species. So all of them, they need to some sort of avoid these temperatures by moving around under these little bushes. Another interesting thing with respect to maximum temperatures is that they can reach a little bit higher values at some depth, at some soil depth, like between 4 and 6 centimeters under the sand, which is a little bit lower than the temperatures that you can observe right under the leaf litter. Possibly there were some sort of convection or some sort of cooling process that was keeping the heat high, at lower depths and at more deeper depths, and some way of cooling down the shallower depths. With respect to mean temperatures, what we could find is that very mild temperatures, not too cold, actually very mild to hot temperatures, could be found down or along long hours of the night. Like you can see temperatures of around 30 degrees to 32 degrees that can go beyond the 8 at night, or 22 hours at night. Like this is normally the sunset happens at around 6 or 7 in the afternoon in Brazil, or in this region of Brazil. So yeah, you could have long long hours of the night with relatively high temperatures in the sun. Here, I'm showing you the ecophysiological measurements that I did for these lizards, and also together with their phylogenetic relationships of the groups. So this helps visualizing the evolution of the traits across the studied species. Here you can see that snake-like lizards go in blue and lacertoids go in red. Okay, so in terms of preferred temperatures, in general, ancient lineages of high and species from higher elevations would exhibit middle values. You can see here values between 36 or 35 something, 37. Then some snake-like lizards will show much lower temperature, also much lower temperatures compared to the others, between 33, 34 degrees. And then the derived lacertoid species here will show pretty high preferred temperatures. With respect to the critical thermal maximum, you could see that some of the snake-like lizards, like for example Notobakia blephara or Scriptosaura catimbao, will show relatively high temperatures, also in the midterm when compared with the lacertoid species from the lowlands. Okay, so the ancient species Silophthalmus pyramidosus or the basal species like Silophthalmus and Micraulephalus maximiliani will show again middle values. The snake-like lizards will show the lowest values, and some of them will show mid values too, similar to the more basal clades. Finally, the lacertoid species will show the highest critical thermal maximum. Finally, with respect to the depth after heating, we will find that while the snake-like lizards were able to dig the most in the sand, very often overcoming deep or reaching deeper than 5 to 6 centimeters, that values were very rare for either the ancient species and the derived lacertoid species. Okay, so in general, what we will find is that from ancient species that would have middle values, the two clades will have evolved either a physiology, some sort of adapted to very hot temperatures, and in the case of the snake-like lizards, they will have evolved not only a better ability to dig, but also lower preferred temperatures or lower to mid preferred temperatures, and also lower to mid critical thermal maximum. Well, when I combine these traits with the environmental temperatures, what I find is that for lacertoid species, it doesn't seem to be a pretty good strategy to dig under the sun to avoid temperatures over the critical thermal maximum. This is precisely because of these high temperatures that you can find a little bit under at shallow depths, but a little bit down the soil below the leaf litter layer. However, when animals have evolved already a snake-like form, they can reach much lower depths. So it becomes easier for them to avoid these temperatures when they appear in the sand. This means that snake-like lizards will be capable of remaining the whole day under the shallower layers where temperatures can rise over the critical thermal maximum. For the lacertoid species, digging would not be so easy. It wouldn't be so beneficial, and they will have to, avoid sunrise filtered through the bushes by running from one place to another beneath the leaf littered layer. With respect to the daily hours with ancestral preferred temperatures, we will find something very interesting. I calculated the ancestral preferred temperatures for both the lacertoid group and for the snake-like group. What I will found is that for the lacertoid group, which had ancestral preferred temperatures between 36 to 38 degrees, digging in the soil will not benefit them a lot in terms of the number of daily hours that they would spend within the preferred temperatures. So digging was not super interesting for them in terms of increasing the time within preferred temperatures. However, by evolving lower preferred temperatures, spending more time digging deeper will become so much more beneficial. So snake-like lizards, and particularly the ones that had evolved the lowest preferred temperatures, they will get the highest benefit from digging in the soil. This is interesting because these ancestral temperatures go between 32 to 35-ish degrees, and these temperatures they extend along the night. This is very interesting because when you go to these places at night, you keep the animals in the terraria, you can see that at night they go up over the surface of the sun, and they go in again, and they keep foraging like that, and they feed on small termites. So sometimes these little lizards, particularly the Calyptomatus, which is a genus that has evolved a particularly nocturnal activity time, they look a little bit like the worms of the Dune movie. It's amazing. You can see them actually coming up, grabbing some termite, and then coming down, and that helps them to remain within their preferred temperatures during the night, while the surface, if I can show, while the surface becomes cooler within some centimeters of sand, you can keep much hotter temperatures, and so you can keep for longer time within your preferred temperatures along the day and become nocturnal. Okay, so my main conclusions from this study were that the ancient lacertoid lineages would still occupy cool habitats at higher elevations and have average traits. In turn, the thermal dynamics and fluidity of this dry sand has allowed for two evolutionary syndromes to flourish. And by evolutionary syndrome, what I mean is that not only morphology will have evolved, but also different traits of thermal physiology and behavior. In one hand, we will have heat-resistant lacertoids that mostly do not burrow, or for which is not beneficial to burrow. And on the other hand, we would have snake-like lizards, which were better burrowers with low thermal preferences, although some of the diurnal species would have relatively high critical thermal maximum, so they were heat resistant. They could be considered heat resistant. Okay, this is another interesting study. This is another interesting study that helped me understanding how lizard lineages might evolve to deal with warmer climates. This study was led by Mariana Grisante and also Tiana Kohlsdorf from another laboratory that was interested in the evolution of snake-like lizards. And they studied other species from the Gymnophthalmidae family. In this case, what they found is that while snake-like species will occur all across a big environmental gradient of aridity, so they could be found from very arid places to very humid places. When you will look at limbed species of this family, you will find that limb-reduced species will tend to occur at drier habitats. So we studied one of these species because it was representing a taxonomic problem in my laboratory, and we had discovered that there were several different clades within this species. Former one species was transformed into 5 different lineages, 2 of which received a specific name. So in this work, led by my advisor, we not only describe the different lineages, but also we could find that the most derived and elongated clades, which means that the clades within this species that would have more elongated body and shorter limbs, or relatively shorter limbs, will tend to live in not only the driest regions within the clade, but also in the places with the highest maximum temperatures. So this means that even within a little clade within a little clade, we will find a parallel process to what Mariana Cristante and collaborators found for the family of Genophthalmidae. This seemed to be a very important process, a very important driver for the evolution of limb reduction and body elongation that at some point will lead to snake-like lizards, or to the snake-like morphology. So up to now, we found that snake-like lizards can evolve at dry lands, that low thermal preferences and better digging skills and thermoregulation are aided by the sun. And there is a problem with being the sun. If you have seen other sandy habitats, they tend to be highly dynamic and fragmented. So would it be possible that snake-like lizards have particularly restricted geographic distribution? To give you an idea, this is most of the area occupied by the genus Calyptomatus, one of my PhD genus of lizards. These 4 species have been discovered in a region of a few hundred square kilometers. This is amazing, and the most that genetic techniques are applied to these lizards, the more new species are appearing with super restricted ranges. So there is something strange happening to these lizards. Maybe the fragmentation of these habitats is leading them to have particularly reduced geographic ranges. Okay, so I have raised this hypothesis with these lizards, so I wanted another group to study that, to try and test that hypothesis. And it turns out that in Australia, there is this amazingly convergent group called the genus Lerista of lizards. In this genus, snake-like lizards, like the one in the upper left of the slide, they have evolved at least 5 independent times. And there are also lacertoid lizards, pretty much like the ones that I had studied in Brazil. So I thought, well, this is a perfect place to go, and also to test. This is the perfect system to test this hypothesis, and also I can have a small trip to Australia maybe. So I contacted with Mike Blick, which is an expert in morphological evolution, especially another aspect on the evolution of a snake, of the origin of snakes themselves. And at the time, he was interested in not only the evolution of this morphotype, but also whether range size, the size of the geographic range of the geographic range of a species, will show phylogenetic signal. And what is this of phylogenetic signal? This means that more closely related species will tend to have more similar characteristics, but not only, we're not talking of tail color, of body length. We're talking about a trait that is generated by the accumulation of home ranges of all the individuals of a species. Like, could this trait also show phylogenetic signal? So he was interested into that, and I was interested in the question of the geographic range size. So what we did is to use available distribution records and genetic material and body measurements that we had or that he and another collaborator, Skinner, would have for this genus. We had it for 68 species. So while Mike prepared the phylogeny and Bayesian correlative analysis, I programmed R scripts to model the geographic distribution of these lizards. And here is the first of our results. The first thing that we found is that there was indeed phylogenetic signal in the range size of these lizards. This would mean that here represented the range size of each species is represented by different colors. And you can see how species who are phylogenetically closer, they tend to show similar range sizes. So for some reason, potentially the evolution of similar morphological and physiological traits will tend to lead to also share geographic range sizes. Apart from that, what we found is that limbless species or limb-reduced species would actually tend to show particularly reduced geographic ranges. Although some of the lacertoid species could also show relatively small geographic ranges too. Okay, so here we had an answer. For Australian Lerista lizards, the evolution of snake-like morphologies will actually be related to some sort of collapsation or collapsing of the geographic range size. But this result was still bugging me. This was because of two things. Okay, the first one is that the distribution data that we had, they were fairly incomplete. For some species, like the ones here in blue, we will only have a single location for the species. So it could be because the species has a super small distribution geographic range size, but it could also be because we simply don't have data. So having bad data for distribution is a very common problem of studies of geographic range size, and it can happen not only so having little data, few distribution records for each species is not the only one problem. The other problem is that for several of these species, we don't know exactly whether they are divided into more species. So one thing that happens a lot, and we have seen this especially in South American lizard, is that known lineages and their known populations that originally are considered a single species, after sometimes taxonomic study, they can split in more species. As we know more of these species, we get more specimens, we get genetic data, and what happens is that the original range size becomes split too, leading to range reduction for several species. So this is a problem that we need to factor out, because we never know which are going to be the species that we are studying now, which later are going to be split into a smaller geographic range size. There was yet another problem, which is that for different groups, like for example mammals or birds, it was body mass which was most related to the geographic range size. The reason for that, as shown here, or one of the reasons for that, as shown here by Turner, is that bigger animals with bigger body weight, they consume more energy. They need more energy to live, and to obtain that energy, they need to have bigger home ranges. This means that in order that for a given species that requires a lot of food, the final range size of the species will have to sum up all these small home ranges, So in general, it is expected that for animals with heavier weights, heavier body mass, they will reach bigger or larger geographic ranges. So in our laboratory, we have been compiling a lot of data for Gymnophthalmidae family, and also we saw that the other collaborator laboratory was also doing that. This lizard family Gymnophthalmidae is interesting for making a test of the relationship between morphology and geographic range size, because they not only have evolved with snake-like lizards, they have also evolved with very large differences in body size. For example, this Neosticurus species and this Heterodactylus, they are much bigger than the really small Bansosaura rubricauda and Scriptosaura catimbau. To give you an idea, these animals could weight around 1 gram, while these ones they can grow up to over 10 or 12 grams in body size, in body weight. So at the time there was not a study, an analysis of whether body shape or body mass would be a stronger predictor of range size, and this is exactly what we did. I proposed that to some of my lab mates and to these people from the other laboratory, to try and create a test of whether it would be shape or body mass that would explain better the geographic range size of lizards, concretely the Gymnophthalmidae lizards. And I would also develop an analytic way to deal with the uncertainty in the range sizes of the lizards, a way to deal with this potential splitting. So in this case, what we found is that while snake-like lizards here in red will actually tend to show very small ranges, other lacertoid lizards here in black will also show very, very small ranges. Nonetheless, well, just that by now. So another thing that we will find is that the age of the clade will not be really important for the size of geographic range, because you could have derived species with theoretically less time on Earth will have pretty large ranges, while very ancient ones could have relatively smaller ranges. So shape was not an important predictor of range size. What seemed to be an important predictor of range size for this lizard was the body size. The body size showed this triangular relationship with geographic range size, in which you could find that as the body sizes of the lizards increase, the minimum range size possible would also increase. This means that for small lizards with a small body size, with lighter lizards, they could either show small ranges or large ranges. But as they would turn increasingly larger or increasingly large, they will need to have large or relatively large geographic ranges. This supports this hypothesis of the energetic needs of home range, the energetic needs of larger body sizes, to explain the necessity for larger geographic range sizes. Also, thanks to my analytic system, we could identify that this relationship was strong enough to up to a 50% of error in the geographic ranges of lizards. So, concluding, the take-home messages will be that snake-like forms evolve from cool adapted species in hot arid regions that restrict muchly their suitable microhabitats. Also, that thermal dynamics of sand at these regions might favor the coevolution of preference for lower temperatures and better burrowing skills. Finally, this process does not help them to increase their range size, which even for lizards seem to depend more on energetic costs of body mass than on body shape. So then now an interesting question that arises is, well, if this is happening to snake-like lizards, how is it possible that the group of snake has become so widespread? The snakes occur all across the world, maybe because they're ancient, but they might have things that have helped them to become better dispersers than the lizards. So this is something that I would like to analyze with more detail. And if there is any student among you that is interested to that, I would love to prepare a project, to help preparing a project that would involve nice expeditions and experiments to try and address this problem. So to finalize, I want to thank to the people that have accompanied me, or that I have accompanied during these years, during the last 10 years that represents the periods that I have been talking about today. And they include my advisor and co-advisor from the PhD, Miguel Trefort Rodriguez and Carlos Navas, the amazing ecophysiologist. The laboratory of herpetology, which brought me so many happiness and so many interesting discussions and so many expeditions and adventures. Tiana Kolsdorf, the leader of this collaborator laboratory, also interested in the evolution of a snake-like lizard, with which also we had several interesting collaborations. Ana Carol Fonseca from the Faculty of Veterinary, who helped me a lot with the X-ray imaging, and Rodrigo Pavan, who helped me a lot with the thermal imaging at the time when I didn't know anything about modeling. So I want to thank you, all of you, also for your patience with this talk, and I'm open to any questions that you might have. Thank you very much.
You can write the questions as well if you prefer to write or to ask directly.
I have a question.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a super cool system. Really nice talk.
Thank you.
I was wondering, like, with the range size or the movement, or that, like, don't you have the feeling that every time you see one of those, you know that it's a lizard and not a snake? Like, even before you get close, there's something about their movement, or when you pick them up, they somehow feel more rigid. Like, even though they've become long strings,
Mm-hmm.
they're still not really snakes, right? Or I mean, I've only seen a couple here in Europe and one of those gecko things in Australia.
Mm-hmm.
That was always my impression. What do you think? Is
Yeah,
there some other traits that might be, super important for dispersal?
Sorry, I didn't get the last part.
Is there is the body shape like a wrong avenue to go down? I mean, is there something else that just makes snakes so much better at colonizing or dispersing than these lizards?
Exactly. So yeah, this is really intriguing me. Like, it seems in one way it seems that evolving this snake-like form helps you live in these very extreme places, right? And this has happened in several different continents. Like, this has happened in several places of Australia, Africa, United States, etc., Asia. But then these lizards, they become like they become very abundant in these places, but at the same time they become restricted to these places. But then you have the snakes that are absolutely, you have snakes that are almost they live almost that are spread across worldwide, like, for example, marine snakes, some like Pelamis platurus. So I guess that there are some things in snakes that might help them become more widespread. One of the most important, though, could be simply the size, the body size, because this is what we found in lizards. Having a bigger body size was directly related to having a larger geographic range size. So there are pretty big snakes, and some of the smallest ones, they live in these dry places in Brazil, and also in Australia, Central America. They're called thread snakes. They're super small. They are burrowing snakes, and they are very primitive too. And they have very restricted geographic ranges. So it is possible that for the snakes, the size is also important.
Or maybe the fossorial habitat. I mean, like sand boas and stuff like that. I don't know.
Possibly fossoriality has to do, but for example, there are some fossorial snakes that live in the Amazon, like for example, an Ilius, and they are not very well known genetically, but they are super widespread distributedly. Like the distribution is like several times Spain, you know.
Wow.
So yeah, there is something. I'm pretty sure that there are skills that the snakes might have, and some of them that might be potentially evaluated experimentally. But in principle, it seems to be the size seems to play a major role into that.
So I wonder if this could be a sort of island effect where these snake-like lizards live in very specific microhabitats, and so for them to disperse to other similar microhabitats, they would need maybe a suitable habitat in between. So if there's no such connection, then they would be restricted to the specific places.
Exactly. That's exactly what my thought. I mean, they become so specialized into these fragmented and localized habitats that it's very difficult for them to get out of that. In the other part of my PhD, I evaluated other traits that was not only thermoregulation. And what happened is that, for example, these lizards, they're very slow compared to the lacertoid ones. And they always, when confronted with different options to escape, they burrow, they dig down the ground, always. I mounted some sort of video game to evaluate how these different options will help them to avoid predators. And what we found using human predators is that the ability to burrow on the ground will be especially helpful if you have an elongated body and you're a little bit slow, because it really decreased the frequency with which attacks were successfully aiming or targeting the body. If you see the lacertoid lizards, they have very brilliantly colored tails. These tails direct the attacks of the predators when they are in movement. When the tails are very brightly colored, it seems like the predator directs its attack to it. It happens to humans. So it seems that in altogether, it seems that the lacertoid species, they are more capable of living without the sun. Because also because I didn't explain you that the lacertoid lizards, they can either bury or hide or do other stuff. So they are more flexible to escape, and they are faster too. And then the burrowing lizards, they are able to feed underground so much better than the other ones. So it looks like the snake-like lizards, they really need the sand. So yeah, so that's I think that we agree in that feeling. The problem now is, how does a snake that was living primitively in an environment like this get out of there and then becomes widespread? Like, there has to be some sort of several steps, evolutionary steps, that allowed them to become as widespread as they are now. Because there are several snake-like lizards lineages that are as old as snakes, like for example dibamids, and they are not as widely distributed.
Yeah, I think it's a great talk and a great topic. Yeah, for me it looks like there is this snake-like lizards are like much less competitive than normal snakes. I don't know why. I think you will figure out why. But then it's for that they are so restricted and then so sun dependent, no? And maybe the metabolism of the snake is higher. I don't know. They have they thermoregulate. They regulate the temperature much better than the lizards. I don't know. Maybe you might discover something that is gonna be different.
Yeah, for sure. There has to be things that have helped them, because it's quite remarkable. Like in 27 times, only 2 groups have been they have evolved a better dispersal capability.
Super interesting.
Thank you.
Regarding the 27 times, I have a curiosity.
Mhm.
So do you know whether there is information, genetic information regarding this speciation, or how, like, this convergent evolution, like these 27 times, it is due to the same genes that are changing? Are there different genes, or do you know if there is any information like that?
That is a very interesting study, which is being performed by Mariana Grisante, the girl the woman that I feel everybody is so young. But the one that I just cited in my talk, and she has been actually trying to identify genes related to the evolution of these morphotypes. Apparently, there is some sort of, I don't remember it very well, but there is some sort of genes that control the number of divisions in the thoracic region.
Yes.
And that's related to the evolution of elongated forms, because what happens basically in snakes and other of these lizards is that you increase the number of vertebrae. But then there are other genes that control the modules of the development of the fingers in the hands and the forelimbs and in the hind limbs. So there is a set of different genes involved, but there might be like a specific general genes that co-evolve, that are being mutated in different instances. You know what I mean? Like it's the same genes, but they mutate in different instances.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. Whether it was, I was actually also thinking about the example that Iker was showing with the pulmonate and the development of the limb. So there might be, because it is a lot of times, so it's 27 times. So I was wondering if there were some developmental genes. Maybe Chris knows more about this, but if there were more development, like key developmental genes that tend to mutate to produce the output of, and they do generate this convergent evolution in different.
Yeah. And there is a fascinating aspect of this, that apparently in some way the exposure to high temperatures leads to some changes, apparently leads to some changes and potentially mutations in these genes.
Yeah, that was my next question. So my next question was like regarding like maybe temperature or other environmental factors regulate the gene expression of certain developmental genes, and maybe that was one of the reasons it was like happening.
Exactly. So yeah, that's I mean that's a super interesting area of research, I think. The environmental regulation of genes, because what we have seen is that lizards or lizard eggs incubated in different thermal regimes, they lead not only to different shapes in the fetus, in the hatchlings, but also different preferences, microhabitat preferences, and different performance. So
yeah, so that might drive all
exactly, like there is some sort of plasticity, or even possibly mutations on the developmental genes, right?
That's very interesting. And also your talk, when you were talking about burrowing, there is actually a video that I saw yesterday that is in Twitter. There is this coral snake burrowing a hole. So it was really, I was picturing that when you were talking about how more elongated bodies are actually more able to like burrow underneath. You see, it's a really video of yours. She's like turning around and taking out sand, so you can actually see how it's burrowing.
Oh, these ones they live in dry very loose sand, so they don't make holes.
No, she was like putting it. She was taking the sand and moving it back, taking the sand and moving it back. It was really interesting.
Possibly to make a hole for its eggs or something?
Yes, she was making a hole, but she was doing it instead of like, as you would expect. I thought it was interesting because instead of being just like you are like pressuring, she was like actively taking out sand. So she was moving the neck, taking sand out.
To use as a shovel or something.
Yeah, and in with these cases, body, you can't do that. Obviously, you need to be kind of like this long shape so you can do that.
Oh, for sure. In this case, it's a bit different. They kind of swim within the sand, so they just undulate, and they need dry sand for that. But it's very interesting because they can do it either forward or backwards. They can go back exactly the same way they go forward. It's very cool to see. It's a pity that I didn't have a video for X-ray, but I only had a camera to take pictures. But it's really interesting to watch them doing it. Okay.
Yeah, I don't know if any. Yeah.
So in line with the geographic distribution, I was wondering whether there are any population genetic studies that in some of these species that could give you an idea about gene flow between populations and maybe dispersal capacities.
Yes, there is. I think there is a study with African lizards that shows very restricted abilities for dispersal, very restricted. In the slide that I showed you, maybe I can share it again. In the slide that I showed about on the distribution of Calyptomatus, I will. You can see. Let's see. Okay. Share screen. You can see that the area of distribution is super small, but also that you have can you see it now?
Yes.
Can you see it?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. So this new species that was initially considered Calyptomatus leolepis, it was just detected because somebody had the idea of genotype a couple of individuals from here. And then we made an expedition to find out and found out that there is a very, very small, a super thin line that divide one species with the other, while they are up. When you look at them, it's very hard to find any morphological difference. So this means that somehow, despite even despite they could be able to move a little bit between the two populations, they have started some sort of genetic barrier or some comportamental barrier that doesn't allow them to keep the genetic mixing of these species. The frontiers here are strikingly small or narrow. You can see, like, if you are in one place, you can see the other place where there is the other species. Like it happens in a few meters, and it's not only this doesn't happen only for this species, but also for the lacertoid species that live in this area. In this small spot, or not so small spot of sand, you have Procellosaurinus of two species, and you are there is a small stream which is absolutely dry for most of the year, and if you are in one side of the stream, you have only one species of this lizard, and if you are in the other side, this is ridiculous, you are at six meters away, you have only the other species. So there are processes blocking the mixing here that we still need to understand better.
So you think that environmental condition, like micro environmental conditions, could be driving that differentiation, like that separation between species, or? I
don't think so. In this case, I don't think so. We are considering genetic chemical clues for reproduction that might create a barrier for them to reproduce or something. But it's super interesting because the animals could totally live in the other side of the stream. The shrubs are the same, the temperatures are the same, you find the same food to the degree that we can identify it, but there is an invisible barrier for them, and it seems to us that it has stayed there for so long. It happens between the different species of Procellosaurinus, and also between Procellosaurinus and Banthosaura. Banthosaura was the one that was like a little bit like a zebra. I don't know if you would remember it. This is Banthosaura, and these ones are the Procellosaurinus, right? So in this region, you find Banthosaura all across this river. And also Banthosaura is distributed down to the Chaco. So it goes down the diagonal, the South American diagonal, right? Okay, he is absolutely unable to reach to this part of the dunes, which is completely covered by Procellosaurinus. and again, you see, you are on a shrub that is filled with these little beautiful lizards, and you look 50 meters away, and it's going to be only filled by Procellosaurinus. So the dispersal in these places seems pretty interesting to study.
August, I think we should start finishing the talk.
Oh, sure. Well, people, thank you very much. Thank you, Irene, for presenting and organizing this, and thank you, everybody.
Thank you. It was nice talk.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you. Thank you,
Gracias, Miguel.
Agus.